All right, well, I am in Irvine, California today, and I am joined by Kenny.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. So maybe just want to introduce yourself first and where you work, and we'll get into the details a bit more.
Sure. My name is Kenneth Kimura, and I am the Director of Product Development at Wynne Systems.
Very nice. So I've heard about Wynne Systems a lot. Obviously, I used to work at one of their sister companies, and a lot of big companies in the United States use Wynne Systems as well. So I'm pretty interested to dive into the history of Wynne Systems at one point. But maybe before we get into that and talking about the product and whatnot, maybe just more about yourself on sort of how you got initially involved in the equipment rental industry.
Yeah, so prior to Wynne Systems, I was an accountant, specifically in the legal and real estate industry. So Wynne was my introduction into equipment rental. We were joking earlier about, people are either born into equipment rental or they just suddenly find themselves in there. And I was definitely one of the latter. They hired me on initially because of my accounting background. Wynne Systems, Rental Man is a really large, robust application, right? So you have to know the front end and the back end, front office, back office. So when I came in initially as a level 1 customer service rep, I will say that was the hardest job I've ever had, right? Because it's a big system and you don't know what directions the questions are coming from, right? So I might answer a question related to the general ledger on one call, then 2 minutes later have a question about rental operations. So you had to get very good at finding answers very fast.
And it's not just like the system, because the system is just like what the user is inputting or outputting from the actual software. It's also the operations of the business on why someone's doing something in a branch.
Exactly. And coming in from not a rental background, not really understanding what the users are doing at that point in my career, it was difficult to marry up this function in the system with this physical task, right, that the users are trying to complete.
So how did you combat that then?
Well, there was a lot of scrambling in the first month or so, and then one of the senior CSRs took me out to a rental yard for the first time, and it really was something to see what our users are actually doing and what part is a physical activity, out in the yard or at the counter, and then what comes back into the system. That really started to put it together for me.
Yeah, and I think if you build relationships with any business that you're dealing with, and like you build that trust, like people will take the time to try and explain things to you as well. Like they know that someone's not going to know everything. And so it's putting that effort in to build those relationships with customers, like visiting them and stuff like that.
Absolutely. It goes a long way to build goodwill, to understand that they are, you're learning where you're trying to understand what they do so that you can help them better.
So you started off in a support role, assisting customers, answering their questions.
Yep.
And then where did that lead to?
So I was there for a few years. So if you use Rental Man, you called in about 10, 15 years ago, I was probably picking up the phone, talking to you. After that, I moved into technical writing. So a lot of the documentations around Rental Man, our different processes, our different applications. Good chance you've probably read some of my stuff.
So maybe just for the listeners, just to dive into a little bit, like when you say technical writer, what does that actually mean?
Yep. So Rental Man is a big system, like I mentioned before. And when you have a big system like that, you want to make sure that you provide your users with the documentation to support them, right? So if they're trying to use the application, you can give them directions on how you use it and when you use it, as well as how you set it up to do different things.
Yeah, and then obviously coming from that support background and then doing that would have gave you like a wealth of knowledge of how the system's actually configured and works, yeah?
It did, yeah, and through those two positions, I became a bit of a subject matter expert on most of our applications, and that really set me up for the rest of my career.
So you did that for a while, and then where did you jump into?
From there, I actually moved to the sales team as a sales engineer. So my job was to accompany sales reps during their sales calls, and just be the subject matter expert in the room, right? Make sure they didn't oversell or undersell the product, be able to communicate to the customer exactly what it does and why that's helpful.
Yeah, it's a position that I really like. Like I used to call it a pre-sales in my previous role, but I often used to tell customers what the system can't do quite a lot. Like they would say, can I do this? And it'll be like, this is all what we can do, but no, we can't actually do this. Now, there's ways to fix that. We can build it. There's alternative routes. Because if you send a salesperson in, they just start saying yes, 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 yes. It gets thrown over the fence to the implementation team, and then there's friction.
Right.
Sales said you can do this. Why can't it? This is what I was overpromised. All those things that I'm sure you've seen before when you got a salesperson that just wants to get the signature,
Yep.
rather than actually building the relationship up. So that sales engineer role, like when people want to move into sales, I think it's very intimidating. Like, how was that mindset moving into that role?
It was, it was an adjustment, right? For sure. I had not been involved in sales calls prior to that. So a bit of it was building a relationship with the sales rep to, make sure that they had a good expectation of what I brought to the table on Wynne's behalf. But then it's also making sure that we set the right expectation with the customer, right? We don't want to oversell the product, because what that'll lead to is a really difficult implementation, right?
Yeah.
That's not really good for our customer or for us.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, as I said, like you can be the bad guy in the room that's giving the brutally honest feedback.
Yep.
And you have to have the balance with the person that's closing the deal, basically. But I've seen it before. If you don't have that person in the room, like it creates a lot of problems later on, and then the trust can be broken down at certain points.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then doing that, so obviously just walking through support and then technical writing and then actually demoing and configuring and working with customers, like your knowledge is just obviously increasing dramatically. Like I remember when I was in that pre-sales role, like I learned so much more than anywhere.
You have to.
Yeah, because you actually understand, because you need to explain to someone how it's going to work in their business. And what are the benefits going to be, and what are the challenges, and what are the thinking on your feet as well about how would I do this, and then being able to try and figure it out as well.
Yeah.
So then doing that, then what was your next role?
So from there, even while I was in that sales engineer role, I was put in contact and working with pretty closely a product manager, actually I think a product director at the time, to go out and start building new products. And a part of that was just my domain expertise with the system, understanding what RentalMan couldn't do, what pieces were there to build out an application. And then that was the experience that really led me to jump over to product management.
So maybe we'll get into the product side in a sec. But what I'm keen on doing is talking about the history of Wynne and where it's served in the market. It's one of the long-standing providers in the equipment rental industry and is used by quite a number of major customers in the US market, one of which is United Rentals. Yep. So maybe just to start off with, like, do you know how Wynne started and what was the beginnings or the early days?
Yeah, so Wynne was started in 1991 by a man named Terry Wynne, who set out to create a bespoke system for the equipment rental industry, right? There were a lot of different systems that were being used. None of them were specific to equipment rental. In fact, a lot of our early customers were running on like Excel, right, when they came to us. It started pretty small. I wasn't there for it, but the stories are always, our first few architects working out of Terry Wynne's living room and garage. So very humble beginnings, but we've certainly grown from there. And
so over the past 20 years or so, then, like how, like the business started in 1991, like, and obviously is a massive company now. Like, how has it evolved from that point? Was it starting with small amounts of users and then growing? Because getting someone like United Rentals or Sunbelt is a massive undertaking for change management. Like, how did you sort of build up to becoming one of the major players in the US?
Yeah, well, it started small, but like I said, there weren't a lot of players sort of specifically in the rental equipment software industry. So we grew very quickly, and then in 2000 we were bought by United Rentals. So actually when I came on board, I was technically a United Rentals employee, which was a little weird, right? Because we're a software company owned by a rental company. So I remember, sitting at my desk and being asked to take online safety courses for warehouse management and forklift safety, which didn't super seem to fit with my job description.
Yeah. So, all right. So I did hear this story. So United Rentals bought Wynne Systems, and then eventually did it split off again? Or?
We did, yeah. So obviously there's a bit of a conflict of interest there, right? It makes customers a little bit nervous to know that the software that they're purchasing is owned by probably their largest competitor.
And maybe they're concerned about their data and whatnot. Yeah.
Right, and that there was never any danger. They were very, very diligent about making sure that data was secure, but it was always a conversation that we had to have.
Yeah.
And then you sort of couple that with our R&D was tied to United Rentals, which means that we were building things to solve United Rentals problems and not necessarily the challenges that everyone else is facing, right? So innovation was really kind of pointed in one direction. And then even for United Rentals, it's expensive and awkward to run a software company when you are a rental company.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that all of that kind of led to the decision to divest us to Constellation Software in 2012.
Okay, interesting. And then I guess when talking about that point, when you've got a system that's being developed by the largest rental company in the world, that's not going to suit like a mum and pop operation where they're just trying to run a single store.
Exactly. They have different challenges.
Yeah. And so then, but Wynne or Rental Man has been split into multiple products now as well. I know like InTempo
True. Yep.
is there. So was that a directive to try and solve the smaller end of town?
It was, right, because even after we moved to Constellation Software, we still had a really kind of wildly diverse customer base, right? On the higher end, we had the Sunbelts and the Hercs and the major players in that market, but we were also servicing mom and pop shops. And again, they just have different challenges, right? And so in 2015, we split into Wynne Systems and InTempo. And InTempo offers kind of a very specific SaaS model of the Rental Man software, whereas Wynne Systems was then free to focus on the sort of enterprise level companies.
Okay, well, just on your customers then. So in terms of the Wynne Systems rental software, like what are the types of companies, or which companies are utilizing your software?
Yep, the major players in really around the world. So companies like United Rentals, Sunbelt, Ahern, Herc. We've got 8 of the top 10 of the RER 100, and roughly about a third of the RER 100 uses our software. Wow,
that's a pretty impressive stat to throw out there. And so having so many of those major players, in particular in the US, utilizing Wynne Systems or Rental Man, like why do you think they use your software?
Yeah, because Rental Man really helps them scale, right? It's a full service ERP. So we manage not just the rental operations, but equipment maintenance, finance, logistics, all of those different pieces, reporting back to the same database, the same source of knowledge is really important in helping organizations that size manage that many branches.
And I think that's a really good point. Like one of the biggest challenges I've seen in businesses is when they have third-party financials at a large organization. I think for smaller organizations, it's quite good because they can external accountants and that sort of stuff. But when you've got like a 50-branch operation and you're trying to run external financials and you're trying to sync the two systems up, it can be quite challenging. And so that must be a massive selling point for Wynne Systems to have the integrated accounting as part of the solution, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. Having, what happens at the front counter and, out at the job site inform, right, what's happening in the back office is a big efficiency play for them.
Now, I do want to talk about the Wynne product, and we'll get into the roadmap on where the company's going. But I guess from an external perspective, like I've seen Wynne Systems at some point, and I've seen the green screen and whatnot, and whatnot, and I feel like I want to address like where the company is going, and I want to make sure that people understand that it's not like a dying product or a product that's like stagnant. Do you understand? Like,
right.
It's an innovative company that is continually to reinvest into to take the product to the next level. So maybe just want to talk about like if someone was to ask you, like if you're in a sales room and you're a sales engineer and like, why would I want to use your software? It's a green screen. Like what would you say to that person?
I would say that they're very unlikely to see the green screen. So when people talk about green screen, you're really just talking about the core. And in that core is built literal decades of business intelligence, business logic, which is almost impossible to replicate. But that doesn't mean that's where the end user is going to be living, right? We have applications built in HTML and Angular, providing very modern, very user-friendly and up-to-date user interfaces, right? That will still rely on that core to provide that business intelligence, provide that business logic, and serve it up to the end user.
So it's basically being able to enable your mobile workforce or your front counter workforce as they need, and having a modern technology stack there, and then being able to empower the back office. Is that what you're basically saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And so when did that journey start?
I would say that really started about 8 or 9 years ago. We realized that a lot of the work happens away from the counter, right? You can't expect somebody to sit at a desk all day. Even the people who are counter users, right? Counter personnel are getting up and they're walking around the store with the customer, walking around the yard with the customer, doing a consultative type of service, right? So they need something that follows them out into the yard, right? So that we can kind of marry up the physical task that they're doing out wherever they are, as well as the sort of electronic logging of that task.
Yeah, I always use the analogy of like Apple. Like when you walk into an Apple store to buy something, like you very rarely stand behind a desk. Like they sort of follow you around with their device, and they do everything. Like when someone walks into a rental store and they want to rent something, you should walk with them and scan the asset and check out the asset, or do an inspection, or take it, or do a quote from that, whatever it is. But being able to do that on a phone or tablet is like a massive play, and it's a big mindset as well. Because what I found when I was working with some of these rental companies is that those staff members use the counter as like a protective barrier.
Right.
They feel like they're on the other side. The customer can't see what they're doing, and so when they've got a phone in their hand, they feel like the customer's watching them. Yeah. When the screen's turned, it's like they're just typing away, and they can sort of feel safe. And so it's also a change in the I guess the culture within that branch or branches as well.
Well, it's a competitive advantage as well, right? I mean, a lot of our customers rent the same stuff. So the difference maker there is the level of service they can provide, right? And what that model provides their customer, and the experience that provides the customer.
So you were touching on like enabling a device to follow the people around where they're going, basically. So just dive into that. Like, what are some of the mobile products that you've built out then?
Yep. So we have a product we call Mobile Link, right? And that's just a mobile platform built to work on a phone or a tablet. And it allows, a user, it's built for a lot of things, actually. It's built for checking in and checking out of equipment, right? It's built for creating orders from your phone in conjunction with one of our customers, Total Safety, which operates a very kind of a small tools counter type of business. And it really creates a very slick, streamlined way of scanning in an order and then creating an order on the fly. So what it's done outside of that particular model is it also allows other customers of ours who are more general rental to do exactly that. Walk around with the customer, scan that piece of equipment in, and just create an order right there.
So basically, and this is one of my questions, my follow-up questions, is one of the important things I think with rental software providers is that the rental software company isn't just building what they think that they need to build. Getting the input from customers is like vital to be able to build like a usable product, because what you think you need and what the customer's actually going to use is two different things. And so you mentioned that you built this mobile app with a customer. And so is that common? Does that typically roll out into the rest of your customers? Is that normally how you would work things?
Yeah, we have a couple of models. We can build something and make it
bespoke,
proprietary to them. But anything that we build, we try to keep the larger market in mind, so that it's applicable to other models as well. It is very common for us to build features and functions in conjunction with our customers. We have a really good close relationship with most of them. We spend a lot of time observing their operations, or even just doing consulting work with them, right? They'll ask us questions, give us, problems, challenges that they're facing, right? Which usually has to do around driving behavior of their users. And then we see what we can do in terms of building a solution that drives the behavior that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And then, so what's the response been from users in terms of using mobile apps? Like I was mentioning before that it can be quite intimidating to have a customer watching you do something, but people have been delivering things for forever on phones and getting you to sign and whatnot. So I feel like it's just an evolution of time of people getting comfortable with these apps. Like what has been the response that you've seen?
Yeah, the response has been good. MobileLink is probably our highest utilized application. We've got something like 3,000 daily active users.
Wow.
So it gets used a lot. I think at this point in time, having a mobile application is kind of a gimme, right? You have to have one now.
And then what about from I guess another area that's quite popular is being able to rent things online. So is that something you've been exploring in terms of having like a portal or something along those?
It is. Yeah, we built an e-commerce application into our customer portal. Right.
Wow,
so
okay.
Our customer portal at one time was primarily a reporting application. And this is one of our older products. And the idea was, well, if our customers or if our customers' customers, right, can get all of the information on their account or, all of the information on their account, then they're not calling into the branch to get information, have them run reports on RentalMan, and tie up those counter people's time with things that aren't driving sales.
Yeah, a massive one that I think, I'm not sure if you're doing this, but I think it's a massive boost is being able to allow someone to call off rent online.
Yep.
Like that I think it's a game changer in terms of enabling customers. Now, some people might say, hey, we don't want to make it too easy for someone to call off rent the equipment. But I think being able to empower the rental company to see exactly what they've got on rent and even looking at maybe the utilization hours of the machine as well in conjunction with that, and then being able to make an educated decision on whether they need something or not. I think it builds a massive trust relationship between the rental company and their customers. Is that something you're exploring?
Yes. We in our customer portal, we actually built a widget that will show our customer's customer what they have coming off rent in the next 7 days. Just 7-day view of what's due to come off rent. Now, whatever we build, our customers can decide what their customers see. So it's always kind of funny. They have very differing philosophies as, maybe some of our customers don't want their customers to see what's coming off rent. And, if they call it, they call it. And we have other customers who are very proactive. They'll even want, a notification to be sent out to say, hey, you've got this coming off rent. Do you want us to come pick it up? Do you want to hold on to it a little bit longer? And I like that because it gives them a little bit more visibility into their availability and their bandwidth coming up as well. It's not, a surprise.
Yeah, I've heard both arguments. I've said that discussion with some people and they freak out and say, hey, we're going to affect revenue if we tell customers don't talk to them. But I've heard other people go down the route of it builds trust. We can actually have a true reflection of our availability. The customer knows them. We're not trying to gouge them, all that sort of stuff. So there's both arguments. And I think it also changes based on the type of equipment that you have as well. It's not just across the board, I would say.
And the current utilization of that equipment, right?
Definitely. So then leading into other, what other developments have you been working on at Wynne Systems?
We've been working on a service application. We actually came out with it a couple of years ago, and it's constantly evolving, right? And the way this came about, actually, one of our customers just told us, hey, our mechanics, we need to keep a really close eye on our mechanics, right? We want them to be productive. But if we, so we give them these quotas that they need to, fix X number of machines every day. But if we aren't careful about what they're working on, what they do is they go pick the easy equipment to fix, right? So that they can knock out a bunch every day, but they're not necessarily fixing the equipment we want them to fix, the equipment we need them to fix. So that's how that conversation started. And we take that idea and we kind of vet it around different customers. Like, is this an interesting idea? Is you have this problem? And enough of our customers, I think all of our customers said, yeah, that's exactly something that we deal with. So we take that sort of decision-making logic, right? When a service manager decides what someone's supposed to work on, how do they come to that decision? What are they looking at, right? What is the current order load? What is the current utilization of a particular type of equipment? And what we built was essentially a prioritization engine, right? That puts the equipment that, at least based on the rule set and the business logic that we have today, says we think this is the next piece of equipment that needs to be fixed, and then all the way down the line based on all of those factors. And that's really kind of just on a higher level strategy, something that we're doing at Wynne in different areas, not just service, right, is to take that business logic of the people who have been working in the industry for 10 plus years and have all that tribal knowledge. The people who, like, if they're out sick, everybody has a bad day because a lot of those processes start to break down.
Yeah, I could see that same logic would be really useful in transport and logistics, like knowing what should you pick up next based upon like an call off rent or the delivery or my load of my truck or whatever it is. I could see having like what do you call it, route optimization maybe is probably the right word.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. That's something that we're working on right now. So we have a logistics application, that'll give an experienced dispatcher all of the information that they need to make good decisions, right? And show them in a nice graphical way of, like, what are the opportunities to create efficiency? And that's great if you have an experienced dispatcher, but, with the turnover these days and general labor shortages, we want to sort of replicate the logic behind, that an experienced dispatcher uses, right, to make good decisions, and be able to present that to a less experienced dispatcher so that they can also make the similar, same good decisions.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see there's a massive benefit in that. It's just trying to figure out, because every company is a little bit different, so you want to make sure that you develop something that is usable across the board. And you mentioned that's probably one of the key things and when you're designing something on how is this going to work as an industry standard rather than how's it going to work for your business.
Right, and that's where rules engines, right, really come into play because, we may have 5 customers and they may generally make decisions the same way, but everybody's got a little bit of a tweak. We want to make sure that we can capture those nuances.
Yeah. And then you spoke about reporting briefly as well. So one of the things that I think a lot of equipment rental businesses don't do enough of is they've got this amazing data set within their business and they don't report on their data well enough. They either don't know how to, they don't have access to it, they don't have a data warehouse, they don't know how to use Power BI or Tableau or whatever it is. And they're typically using like stock reports, like just a Crystal report or whatever it is coming out of the system, which is quite an old style, where there's so much ways to like analyze data now and make decisions. So what are you doing in that analytics space?
So we track a lot of data in RentalMan as a full service ERP. We are beginning to leverage that data to make predictive suggestions about the future, right? So looking at year over year demand, right, to be able to predict geographical demand, right, to be able to predict what the demand might be this year based on sort of trending data from the past.
It'd be really cool if you could integrate that data to, what's it called, Chat GPT?
We are keeping a very close eye on Chat GPT and what that can do, because I think, if we can find a way, and I think we can, to apply that effectively, that's going to jump us forward very, very quickly. Not just the data that we own, right? We can start looking into other data sets like weather or the price of fuel, right? And see how that changes the decisions that our applications make and suggest to our end users.
Yeah, anyone that's listening that doesn't know what ChatGPT is, I would highly suggest you Google it and check it out. I won't go into detail what it is, but if you create an account and do a bit of playing, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
We could talk for an hour just about that if we wanted to. So, cool. So then, in terms of your roadmap, so it sounds like you're working with your customers, and then do you have your own prioritization of what you want to build as well, or is it typically always from customers?
We We do a few things. So I think first and foremost, and probably my favorite, is our customers just tell us, right? They tell us what their challenges are, and what they're looking to fix, and sometimes there are things that they don't even think that we can fix, and we can surprise them with the solutions we come up with. Or obviously tech is always moving forward. I think ChatGPT is going to change us a lot. Problems they didn't think we could fix, or maybe we can't fix today, right? Or challenges we can't overcome today. Doesn't mean that we can't overcome them tomorrow or next year, right? Yeah. So that's one of the most common. Our customers just come and tell us. Another way is that we do our own trend analysis. So just to give you an example, one of my product managers was looking and noticed that our construction customers were processing higher and higher numbers of re-rentals, which means that they're renting from rental companies. And so following that trend and really just kind of crunching the numbers, we noticed that spend on re-rentals, right, renting from rental companies, has almost quadrupled, right, over the past 4 years, even pre-pandemic. And so that's something that presents an opportunity for us to start to understand, okay, well, what is this process? How can we facilitate that process?
Yeah, and I think make sure that you're making money on your re-rents as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a critical thing, yeah. I've definitely seen companies that aren't tracking their purchase orders accurately, and they get invoiced one thing and they invoice their customers a different thing. And so being able to optimize that process is critical, I think.
Another thing that we do is our customers will often request us to come out and do a consulting gig. So we'll come out and we'll, either they'll walk us through their operations, right? Or we'll just spend a day observing their operations so that we can come back with a bunch of suggestions on how they might optimize the way that they use the system. And oftentimes there's some quick wins, right? I noticed you're printing way too much. You don't even use the stuff that you print. You can flip this little flag here, and you'll stop printing those, which you're not using it. It's just going straight into the garbage, or using it as scrap paper. Yeah. So there's always those quick wins. But what I like to do is I like to spot, for all of the ways that a rental branch is different from a standard office, there are a lot of ways that they're the same. So I always try to look for the drama, right? What's the person who looks like they're being held together by 5 cups of coffee and like some string and duct tape, who's been given the most amount of desk space, who seems to be a part of everyone's day, right? And then start asking questions about what they do, and then see if what they do. Most of the time, they're doing a lot of searching. They're finding things, but they're finding things in our system, right? Which means that we can help them find things in our system, and take that business logic, take that decision-making logic, replicate it so that we can serve them up with, 3 to 5 options, right? And then they can pick the right one. And then from there, we can start to track and record and report on how often were we right? How often did they pick the top option that we thought was the best option? How often they pick something else? How often did they do something that wasn't even on the list? And then start to understand why, right? And learn from that, and then try to make that top option the right option more and more often, to a point where we can even start to automate that, right? Where we don't even need someone to then pick it.
Yeah, because I guess if you do solve that problem in one branch, it's typically going to be happening in other branches as well. Yep. And if you take the scale of one of these companies that has 400 branches and you multiply the cost savings, that's when it's very easy to start saying, well, if we do it here, we know we're going to save $1 million this year.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the benefit of working with these big companies, because the cost multiplies.
Right. A couple of years ago, at our user conference in Nashville, our keynote speaker was Dale Asplin, who was at the time, and maybe still, the CIO of United Rentals. And he talked about, taking the information that he gets from Wynne Systems, just from all the operational data, and turning that into a better understanding of the real cost of ownership, right? And a true ROI, to make better informed buying decisions about, how do they build their fleet, right? What are the right things? Something might be more expensive to buy, but over the lifespan of the equipment, the ROI will be higher.
The machine breaks down, the tech going out to fix it, loss of the rental rates because customers don't want to pay when it's not working, like all those little things that you add up.
Right,
If you're not,
the cost of parts, right?
yeah, the timesheets, the parts, all that sort of stuff. Like, if you're not tracking all that information, and even if you are tracking that information, if you're not reporting on that information, because one thing I think that's really important with reporting and dashboards is I don't like when people make dashboards for the sake of making dashboards.
Right.
Because it's pointless, yeah?
Yeah.
Like if you're not going to make a decision that's going to change an outcome,
Right.
like it's just a pretty picture, yeah?
Yeah.
It looks good.
Yeah, sure, you can have it to make yourself feel better.
Yeah.
Pat yourself on the back, but
Someone walks in, oh, yep, that's a great dashboard.
dashboards should drive action.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's probably a critical thing, like in any business, like they need to be guided on what they're doing and why they're doing it, and tapping into all those data points. So let's say that I am a business that is looking for a new rental software, whether I'm a 20 user or 1,000 user.
Yep.
What recommendation would you have for a company that's like starting this journey?
Let's see, the first thing I would say is when you're evaluating a software package, do your due diligence in the gap analysis, right? Have a very strong understanding of what's going to change when you implement the software. And hand in hand to that, right, is having a very strong focus on the challenge you're trying to resolve, right? What are you trying to achieve by changing software packages or even just taking one on? And that's going to help inform your decisions, right? It's going to help decide whether or not, it's worth it or what the right package is for you. And just kind of coming back to the gap analysis, I would say, pivoting late in the process is expensive and painful. So the more work you do up front to understand the total change is going to be worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I spoke to one of the people that helped implement Kenneth's Hire with their ERP system, and he mentioned that the planning phase for him was the most important. Like you need to plan out everything that's going to go right, wrong, whatever it is, and then have a plan for the plan and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Because if you don't take the business along as part of that journey, you're going to run into like bushfires along the way that are going to blow up, and now you're in the point where you're making quick decisions on what you want to do next, and those quick decisions turn into a modification and a modification and a modification, and then I think a year later it's like, why do we do that modification? You know what I mean? It becomes this spider web of like what we want rather than having a clear, I guess, goal.
Yeah,
for the business.
exactly. And I think that alongside that, having that corporate sponsorship, right? Having that clear message is going to help you manage the change, because not everyone in the organization is going to want to change what they do, right? What they've been doing has been working for them for a long time, and maybe they're not feeling the pain of your current system. They don't feel or recognize the different things that are keeping them from, or keeping the business from doing what it needs to do. So they're going to be resistant naturally. So having that corporate sponsorship, having that organizational alignment is also going to be key in any implementation.
And then so let's say someone selects a software vendor in terms of like the team to implement it. I've seen it before where they just like pluck someone out of operation and say, you're the person who's going to implement this software, and then that person's now doing two jobs. They're doing their day job and they're trying to implement this software. Like what's your recommendation typically for this sort of thing?
I would say that probably the most successful implementations, the easiest, the least painful, I've seen happens with generally a point person from every department, right? So you don't want an operations guy trying to implement a financial software. I think things just go sideways really quickly. But if you have somebody from every department who can participate in that gap analysis, in that evaluation, you are going to get that organizational alignment much easier than if you have one department trying to dictate to the other departments what they're going to be doing next.
Yeah, and I think being able to make people feel like they're providing input as part of the change is important as well, yeah? Like if you tell someone to do something straight away their armor's up here. It's like, nope, I'm protecting my service department and whatnot. It's almost like you want to say to them, look, this is what we're thinking about. What option do you think works best? And then let them choose and then provide feedback and then involving them along the way. So when it comes to the point of implementing, they've already like seen and been involved and they understand. They might even meet the rental software's team, like whatever it is as part of that. So when it comes, it's not a Band-Aid that you're ripping off. It's basically like you're excited for the change. You know what I mean?
It's funny, some advice I got early on was the key to management is making everyone think it was their idea.
Okay.
I think if you can do that, you get people excited about the change.
Yeah. And then so I guess what are typically the key challenges that people face during implementation? Like what are the hurdles or the gotchas that people need to think about? Like I can think of data being a big one.
Data conversion's one. Process change is usually a pretty big one as well. People are used to doing things a certain way, and so just retraining them to do it a different way can be one. Usually, I will say the ones that tend to be the biggest blockers, the biggest challenges, are the things that got missed during the gap analysis, because they're the ones that no one's prepared for, right? I would say visibility, being able to find things, right? You're used to searching for things one way, being able to find them maybe another way, and people get frustrated really quickly.
Yeah, I think like you touched on, like someone has been doing something a certain way for 10 years or however 20 years, whatever it is, and they're just like they feel safe in that bubble. Yeah. And I think it's about explaining to them like what the benefits are going to be. But then also I think it's very important to remember that like when you look at someone like Wynne Systems or Rental Man, like it's used by like how many customers do you have? Like how many users do you think you have in the US?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands of users are using the system now. Like why is your business different?
Right.
Why is your business, like why do you want to be different to what the best practice is? So it's almost about trying to get them on board with molding to a certain thing.
I'm not sure actually. I will say individuality I think tends to come into play there. Not everybody wants to conform. So I can see that as a challenge. Just because everyone else is doing this, they may not, want to jump into that. People are very contrary sometimes.
I think it's expensive, but then, yeah. Like if someone wants custom functionality, then it turns into more of a cost discussion. Like all right, if we're going to do it differently, just know that the check's going to be larger.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
and that's the case here. It's if you want a vanilla implementation, then whatever the cost is going to be for that. If you want like a full-blown custom system, like it costs more to support the product, costs time to build the product, costs time to maintain and test, like all that sort of stuff. So like do you promote that? Do you promote people to want to build custom
Within reason we do, right? And because one of the reasons a lot of people come to us is because they like the fact that we can do custom modifications for them. Not every software provider allows for that. So we'll get a customer who says we want vanilla implementation except for this little tweak and this little tweak, and we like that generally because it adds value to our product. It allows us to serve them better. It's when I think a customer comes to us and then they're going to require very large changes to core workflows in the system that the implementation's going to be a little rocky. And that's when maybe you need to step back and think like, is this the right package?
Yeah, like what if someone said to you, we want to use SAP as our financials?
Actually, we'd be okay with that. We do integrate to other software. That's another good thing about Rental Man is that we do integrate and play well with other solutions in the marketplace, SAP being one of them, especially on the back end. And
then so I guess what do you see the future like in the equipment rental software space? Like over the next 5-10 years or so, like where do you sort of see the industry going?
I imagine automation is going to play a larger and larger part in this. We have we have a labor shortage, right? Everyone's looking to hire more people. The workforce is a little more transient. People aren't necessarily staying in the same companies as long as they have. So we need to provide functionality that helps our customers meet those challenges, right? Be able to onboard people faster, to make people effective faster, come to the right conclusion, make right decisions more quickly. So I think that's going to be a big part of it, and that's certainly something that we're working on now. But I think that really what we want to get to and what we are getting to is predictive analysis, right? So, I might have mentioned earlier, our goal is to give our customers a competitive advantage, right? And we feel the right way to do that is to guide them to the right decisions now that set them up for success in the future. And being able to leverage, the data that we have as well as with data that's available to us to get them there.
Yeah, I could definitely see the predictive stuff could be very useful in the service department.
Yep, absolutely.
Being able to look a few services ahead. What do you have in stock? What do you need to reorder? How does that link in with the service schedules?
Right, and just to give you an idea of what we're doing. So we have, I mentioned the service solution that we have earlier that puts together a list of equipment that we think needs to be fixed. But if we can predict a spike in usage, right? Let's say that we're moving into the dry season and we know that water trucks may have a certain utilization now, but we know that that's going to spike in a month, right? We can certainly, we can start moving those up the list so that you don't run into that shortage when that spike happens.
So it's almost like predicting increased utilization and then changing the priority of when things need to be serviced, basically.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's really important just to find those use cases and being able to support it with data.
Right.
Which takes time, unfortunately.
It does.
It's not like you just, because if you make the decision, like you're basically just going off gut feel, like you need to have evidence-based things that maybe GPT comes into the situation to help you analyze it.
I'm hoping that it will.
But no, it's interesting. And then do you see mobile being like a massive factor continually throughout the industry?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, not just a massive factor, it's a must-have, right? Everything that you do for anybody who steps away from their desk, you have to give them the ability to do that on a phone or on a tablet, especially, yard operations, field service, those kinds of things. They just require it now.
Yeah. And then what about like a web-based application? Is that something? So rather than using it out of an application itself, being able to just go to a browser and type in the application and using it from like a web browser. Is that something you can do at the moment?
Yeah, that's something we do at the moment. Both our service module, pretty much everything is web-based now.
Okay.
Just about everything. I'm trying to think if we have any server client applications, and I don't think we do. Everything's web-based now.
Yeah, and then that turns into the whole front office, back office thing you were talking about before, basically, to be able to empower those people to do their job and then and provide the people behind the office. That's interesting. Like obviously, I think Wynne Systems has a pretty amazing place in just the evolution of the equipment rental industry in the US in particular. Like those companies that you rattle off, like Sunbelt and United and all those people, like those companies can't grow without having a backbone of an ERP in their system.
Right. Yeah, it's proven.
And so whether they admit it or not, that Wynne has helped them grow to where they are becoming today, I think that it wouldn't be possible without having a solid system. So I think it definitely has played its place in the history of what the rental industry has become to a certain point. So, and I think you have a lot of knowledge and experience in those implementations over the last 25, 30 years as well. So those businesses that are coming to Wynne Systems that I guess don't know what they want. You know what I mean? Like
that's a dangerous position to be in, though.
Yeah, but like they might not understand like what's the best practice for mobile in service. Like how do you do things? And I think having that industry experience and being able to provide, as you said, consultative advice.
Yep.
I think is probably a massive factor as well. Because if you're going to someone that doesn't understand rental, like equipment rental companies hate that, and they go to a software company and they have to explain something.
Right.
Having someone to be able to understand is a massive factor.
Yeah, consulting is a huge part of our business, and something that our customers value very highly. Even if they think things are running great, there's always room for improvement. There's always something that we can look at and say, well, if you do this little tweak, you'll gain some other efficiency, or this challenge that seems pretty trivial, and maybe it's not that big of a deal, but hey, you can make it go away just by flipping this flag over here.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, look, I want to learn a little bit more about Kenny
Sure.
outside of Wynne Systems as well. So what advice would you give to someone that's just finishing college or school or whatever it is, and they're sort of getting into their career? Like, what advice would you give to someone?
Yeah, I would say, first and foremost, don't be afraid to ask for what you want, right? If your company is worthy of you, the worst they can say is no. And if you have a good boss, they'll give you a path to yes, right? I would say, especially early in your career, don't be afraid to fall forward. We're going to make mistakes, so probably better off making mistakes doing too much than doing too little. And I would say if you are specifically getting into the equipment rental industry, don't ever show up at a rental branch wearing black leather shoes, because 10 minutes later they're going to be gray and everybody's going to make fun of you.
Definitely. It still caps all the way. Yeah, so those lessons that you said, is that something that you learnt the hard way or you adopted yourself? Because you have quite a progression of your role, and some of the roles you've taken on were quite challenging. It's not like you were just going into a role and like, oh, I just fit into it. Like, you have to spend a lot of time learning as part of it.
Yeah, the shoes thing I definitely learned the hard way. The other two, I wouldn't say I learned the hard way, but I learned too late. It's something that I wish I entered the workforce with that mindset.
Yeah. It's all, like, what was, who's the guy that owns Virgin? What's his name again?
Richard Brandt.
Yeah, he had Richard Branson. He had some crazy quote. It was like, if someone asking you to do something, just say yes and figure out later on.
Yeah. It's like that old acting adage. They ask you if you can ride a horse, you say yes, then go take riding lessons.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's important because, I like the analogy of falling forward. I think it's probably a good way to describe it. Like, you may as well jump in, figure it out along the way, rather than to sort of isolate yourself, because 10 years later you wake up and you're like, wait a second, I'm doing the same job.
Yep.
How did I end up here?
Yeah.
So you may as well challenge yourself, because you might find something else that you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or not like.
Yep. And you want to get to that decision faster, right? Sooner than later. To that point, you don't want to be stuck in a job you don't like for a decade.
Yeah, and opportunities like always pop up. I feel like you don't want to be saying yes to everything and getting like overused, people taking advantage of you, but you also want to be showing an interest in as much as possible, and without leveling out your workload too much. Just always be open to helping people and saying yes, because then you get a little bit of an idea on what other people are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you find yourself in an organization where you have room to grow. Right?
Yeah. Make
yourself indispensable. It's going to open a lot of doors.
And then you mentioned like ask for a promotion or ask for something.
Ask for what you want. I've been guilty of this myself too. Sometimes you lose somebody on your team because you had no idea that they wanted something more than what they had. It's important, I think, as a manager to check in and to ask that question too. But I think for any person, you've got to be your own advocate, right? Let them know what you want to do, what you want out of this job, and start working on a plan to get there. Yeah,
and I think having a solid relationship where the people that report to you don't see you as a boss is probably a critical thing there.
It's important, yeah.
And they're not thinking that they're looking over their shoulder every time. It's like a classic example was when I was 24, I think, I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to travel around Europe, and I remember I went to our CEO and said, I want to do it, and then he was like, no, you can't do that. Like, you're gonna you have to quit. Like, you can't just take 3 months off. And so I think he thought I just wouldn't do it. I think he sort of thought I was just bluffing, really. But it's like if I didn't like ask the question and he told me, and then I probably would just been thinking about it over and over again. How do I ask him? Do I stay this? And it was just quitting. Like I just quit, went overseas, did that, came back to the same job. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it worked out. Like, came back to like a different job, but like a same company.
sure, yeah,
And like in my head, I could have just said, no, I'm not going to quit because like he's told me I can't do it. Like you may as well, as you said, put those things out there and make a decision and then just run with it.
yeah. You know, it's funny. I think kind of earlier in my career, I'm definitely the kind of person who makes do with the tools on the table, right? And not really thinking about, changing the situation, changing my predicament. Probably one of the first really good bosses I had. As soon as he, came in, he asked me to make a list of everything you need, right, to do your job well, to succeed, that you don't have right now, right? And so, I thought about it and put a list together, took it to him, and he said, okay, go get those things, right? And it seems so simple, but, having to break that mindset of I have what I have and I have to make do with what I have was certainly, a big thing for me and my career.
What were some of the things on that list? I'm interested.
I think it's going to be really boring. I think it was source control software.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's a good mindset to have because I think what that also does is it makes you sort of feel empowered that you're making a decision on making that change and owning that. Yeah.
Yep.
Rather than just getting told what to do, because now you're owning that. Like I'm assuming with your product managers, you can't be telling them constantly what the roadmap looks like. It's like, I want you to. There's a problem here in stock taking. How are we going to solve that? Go off and do it. That's the true way of I guess mentoring someone as part of that journey, because they're going to learn, make mistakes and whatnot, and then it's just about picking them up and then guiding them on the next way.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. So then, talking about mentoring, so who do you think has played a big influence in your career so far?
This is a dangerous question. Does it ever get any of your other guests in trouble?
I don't think so. I think a lot of people just mention, plus others. It's like a Grammy speech. Yeah? You sort of just go through and...
I gotcha. Okay, so, Robert Gray, our general manager, not so much right now, but years ago we used to work together on the sales team. And we traveled around a lot together. And I wasn't really used to traveling at that point in time. He was really instrumental in teaching me how to solve what seemed like insurmountable problems creatively, right? Breaking them down and then solving each piece separately. I think more importantly, when you travel a lot, and I do travel a lot. I got a targeted ad for an expense report convention. That's how much I travel. But when you travel a lot, it's really easy to run yourself down, like run yourself ragged, right? Robert taught me how to take care of myself when I travel, right? Slow down, make sure all the important stuff's taken care of, and then get to work. Probably the first product director I worked with, Jeanette Andrews, gave me my first opportunity to get really close to our customers, really close to our users and see what they do. And that's really when the rental industry went from being kind of an academic thing to me to being very practical, very real. Not just knowing what function a user does, right? But really understanding the conditions under which they do it, right? And what's the difference between a good yard tech and a not good yard tech, right? So that was big, and I would say like probably one more, a sales rep we had. I think she was actually the sales director at one point. Helen Sowersby, really, really brilliant person, went to Cambridge or Oxford.
Did she used to work at Rental Result?
Yeah, Cambridge. It's Cambridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And taught me how to identify dysfunction. Right? You walk into an office, what to look for, why are there big piles of paper, right? Or if there's a really busy looking filing system, somebody's trying to process a lot of information and they don't have a good system to do that, right? Identifying opportunities to improve processes.
I remember I was out to dinner with Patrick who also works at Wynne, and he said to me, if you ever want to like improve the efficiency of a rental business, just walk in and then ask them where the stacks of paper are. And that could be like step one.
Exactly that.
Why do you use this paper? And how do you get this paper? And what do you do with this paper? And all those sort of steps. And like it's a pretty, because people like they get stuck in their ways. It's just like becomes the norm.
Yeah.
I remember I was talking to a customer last week, not a customer, just a person, sorry, and they were using a mobile app for another rental software, and he said that he didn't trust it, and so he still prints off the transport ticket as part of it every single time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you got to figure out like why don't you trust it?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Are you scared that the phone's going to die or the customer's like not going to work or like whatever it is? But like that's not really a winning situation, yeah.
No, yeah.
And you'd really hope that like that rental software knows that, because if they don't, this is probably one thing that like if rental software companies don't have that strong relationship, like just because a customer's quiet doesn't mean that they're happy.
Right.
Sometimes they're quiet because they just put up with it.
You know, kind of that reminds me early on when we were launching Mobile Link, right? Our sort of mobile application. A part of that is yard operations, and we didn't see the adoption we wanted to right away, and so we started, following up with users, trying to understand like, well, why aren't you taking pictures, right? And what they really they had the mobile application, but they were still going to a board where the contracts were posted up, grab the paper and walk it out to the yard and go do what they do. So what we did was we just added, on the screen, a list of all of the contracts and in what order they need to be staged, right? And at that point, then our customer stopped posting the paper contracts, right? And so the users, instead of this being an extra task that they have to do on top of what they already do, right, it becomes the thing that tells them what to do next, right? And that was what actually was very helpful in driving adoption.
Yeah, empowering the users rather than like just being a burden.
Right, just adding an extra task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like making them feel like it's more work
Yep.
to do this. I think it's a big factor. And finally, so when you think about success, like how do you define
it? So I know that the right answer is happy customers and happy users, but honestly, it comes right down to having data that proves what we set out to do is what we're actually doing, right? If we create an application that is supposed to reduce downtime for equipment, we want to see that it actually reduces downtime for equipment or increases utilization because they're fixing the right things to keep up with their order load. So that's really what it comes down to, having the data to prove that our applications do what we say they do.
And I think it's being able to take constructive criticism from customers when what you think the software is going to do is different to what the practical experience is, and like not getting too wrapped up in like your thought on how it was going to work. Yep. Because in the end, the customer's always right. Yeah, that they use the product day in, day out. There might be some tweaks or whatnot, but it's being able to listen and then adopt your data to then support the actual argument.
Yeah, it's really, really easy and really dangerous in product development to fall in love with your own product. To the point where you're not listening to the customers, or you're not looking at the data and making an objective assessment as to the success.
Yeah, I can definitely see how product managers can fall in love with a product, and then they
everybody loves their own ideas,
and they can also I feel like there could be if you fall in love too much with your product, there can never be an end date sometimes. Like you don't know, like you're building forever rather than accepting we need to go live, we need to get actual feedback, we need to grow the users, and then we can. If you build forever, you actually don't know. So it's about managing that life cycle of the product.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. And then there's a diminished returns on how much value one product can provide a customer, right? Once you've gotten to a point where I've solved this challenge, right? You want to make sure that you're keeping your eyes and your view wide enough to see other challenges that need to be solved.
Definitely. Yeah, really good. I really enjoyed this podcast and obviously learning about Wynne Systems and yourself. But yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast,
Thank
Kenny.
you for having me.